I'm a food delivery driver. I don't always follow the delivery instructions. I'm a food delivery driver. Let's call me a rusher, so I won't reveal which service I work for. I live and work in a small town with small goals. There aren't many of us rushers here. It's more like the modern world is only just trickling into town, and the idea of having someone run food to your house for you is better developed than the service that provides it. This is why I call myself a rusher. There are only a few of us servicing this town. The app for our rusher service is a cockamamie clusterfuck. I'm using that and being in a rush as an excuse. Oh, and my name's Marie. That's worth knowing for this story. I'm Marie, and I don't need more than the living being a rusher gives me. It's just me to support. I've got no goals, and I'm young and in good health. There's the section of town that has the big old houses. Most of the rest of the town is dinky weatherboard things and a few new builds. In that part of the town, people sit on their front porches, chat at playgrounds, walk dogs, go for jogs, people on the street. In the old part of town, the streets are empty. I suppose if your house is that big, you don't need to get out as much. The big old houses, as you might expect, order food rather often. I got one such order in the evening several weeks ago, so I set out to fetch their tacos and take them to them. Having never delivered to this house before, I assumed they'd only recently trickled into the modern food ordering world. As many other delivery drivers will know, the faster you work, the more you get paid. It was early evening, and I very much expected this to be the first in a line of dinner orders. I grabbed the food from the restaurant, rushed it to the house, and found the address on the first try. Nice and easy, number visible from the street, right where the map said it was. So I went through the double iron gates and parked on their driveway before the imposing front door. With the sun starting to set, the house's lights were being flicked on. In a window up above the front door was the silhouette of what looked like a little kid. The little kid raised an arm and waved at me. I smiled, glad I was bringing him his tacos, and waved back. The day was shaping up nicely, thought me back then. The door was opened by a middle-aged woman in track pants with a blanket around her shoulders. She had greasy dark hair pulled into a messy bun, distinctive high cheekbones, and heavy-lidded brown eyes. I don't judge, so I smiled, handed her her food, and said something to the effect of, "Your kid's sweet. Hope he enjoys his tacos." I'll tell you something about eyes. To say they're windows to the soul is going a bit overboard, but eyes can say a lot. This woman's dark eyes just looked at me like I was a slug. "I don't have a kid," she said, and shut the door. Righto. I turned away and headed back to my car, just assuming she was the kid's grumpy aunt or something. Pulling open the driver's door, I glanced back up at the window above the door. The kid was still there, and, having spotted me again, was once more waving happily at me. I grinned and waved back. Needless to say, I didn't think much of it. Not until I was fiddling with the convoluted delivery app to find the button that would mark this one as delivered. It was only then, sitting in my car on the street outside the house, that I noticed the delivery instructions for the order. Below the pre-fill stuff about whether you wanted no contact or handed to me delivery was a note, "Don't wave at the kid in the window." Now I know, in these times, one thing you all are going to rightly bull-lock me for is not checking whether the person wanted contact-free delivery or not. I know. But over here, the pandemic's pretty sorted. The only people with COVID-19 are in hotel quarantine. I wear my mask, and my experience in this town is that people don't care whether you hand it to them or not, so long as they get their food and you don't cough in their faces. And, see the excuse above. The app sucked. As for the other thing you're going to scoff at me for, well, we'll get to that. Anyway, I had waved at the kid in the window, and even if I'd seen the note, I probably still would have. I wasn't going to not wave at a kid just because some grumpy customer decided I shouldn't. Maybe it made me worry a bit about the kid. But I had another order, and so I took off to make my living, putting it down to the kid being in the naughty corner and the aunt or whoever not wanting him to do anything but reflect on his sins. Turns out my night wasn't so great that day. I had one lady give me the wrong address, then berate me for being so damn stupid. A bloke send me death threats if I didn't get the order to him in half an hour, and by the third, I was wondering what was up with this town all of a sudden. Cash tip. The instructions on the order said, which I was now reading for every order, having been reminded of them. I was glad to see it. The payout would be meager otherwise. So, with the promise of a tip in mind, I pulled up outside one of the many dinky weatherboard houses in town. The instructions, in addition to the promise of a tip, told me the customer was in the guest house out back, and to follow the narrow driveway down beside number 14 to find it. It was completely dark now, and I squinted out into the dark to find the driveway. Number 14, check, then, beside it. Do you call that a driveway? I don't know what car the customer had, but to fit between the fences on either side of the driveway, it would have to be a smart car. Or the person was a better driver than I was and could work with only a spare inch on either side of the vehicle. So I got out, grabbed the order, and, with handed to me and cash tipped my instructions, walked down the path. I'll describe it first. Head-high fences on either side, number 14 on one side, small but well-maintained, number 12 on the other side, looking like a hoarder who didn't cut the grass lived there. Then this narrow-ass driveway with a mostly dark guest house visible at its end. Then I'll describe the other thing I noticed, a pair of footsteps that weren't mine. I knew they weren't mine, both because I could hear my footsteps smacking the concrete driveway, and because they were skipping. Not so unusual, I'm sure. Could have been a kid I couldn't see skipping away in the back garden of number 14. At 1 in the morning. But here's the thing, they sounded like they were right next to me. I looked around, then stopped and looked back up the driveway towards the road. The footsteps stopped. There was no one there. Okie dokie, I thought. An owl hooted. Thanks, owl. It was already late at night. Most of the town had gone to bed, and now I felt like I was in a horror movie. I turned back to my task at hand and started walking. The skipping started up again, right next to me. And no one was there. Just disembodied skipping footsteps next to my plotting. And then they laughed. They, like some invisible kid next to me, laughed. It chilled me to the fucking bone. A sweet, tinkling laugh on a narrow driveway that had only me in it. So I did what any sane person would. I hurried up, got to the guest house door, barely paid attention to the fact that it was flaking and peeling everywhere, a hole in the eaves above me, and knocked. Mary, a voice called behind me, coaxing and sweet. That tinkling laugh started up again, and I knew it was the weird kid ghost thing. Play with me, Marie. Nope. No thanks. My back stiffened, and I knocked again, refusing to turn around and see nothing again. The door was pulled roughly open. In the doorway was a man with more hair than a shirt. He looked like a gorilla, and the fur was what gave his wife beater sleeves. Hi, I said, a little startled, and held out the food. The man took it, looked at it, and went to shut the door. Oh, hang on, I said, irritation making me forget about my childhood problem. Did you write about cash tip? The man glanced at me, snorted, and proceeded to finish shutting the door. For a second, on the doormat of the shitty guest house, I was livid. Lying dumbhead. I can't blame that one on the kid ghost. That was all me, and I pulled a face at the knowledge that had come out of my mouth. I'd been going for fuck you asshole. So I turned and stomped back up the spooky driveway. The skipping started up beside me. I just groaned and decided that was done for the night. I probably would have posted on here about my weird kid ghost earlier with a far more panicked post, only by the next morning the kid was gone. I didn't hear any skipping or any requests to play. Nothing. And in the morning light, that I'd encountered a weird kid ghost the night before seemed stupid. It was more likely I dreamed it. But one thing I did notice over the next few days was that my tastes had changed. I usually pack a snack for myself while I work the delivery shift. Getting ready to head out on every one of those days, I grimaced at my fridge, condemning with a glare the quinoa and kale stir fry and pesto pasta salad leftovers. Then went into the freezer with a taste, for the first time in a year, of frozen nuggets and fish fingers. Not a big deal. I have been known to do this, getting a taste and wanting to eat only that for a while. That's where the pesto pasta salad had come from. And I'm not a big coffee drinker. That I went off it isn't so significant. And nor is the fact that beer now tastes like fizzy pickled gym socks. All of that was probably just a good thing. And here's the weird part of it. I still liked whiskey. Anyway, I worked on it as normal and somehow didn't get a job in the old part of town for a couple of weeks. When I did get my next job there, it was at the house with the waving kid. I dicked about, trying to work out whether I should accept this job or not, and eventually gave in and hit the accept button. It was early evening. I already knew the instructions for this house, and no one else was ordering dinner yet. I fetched the burgers, and as I was walking out of the restaurant with them, the app started to ping me with all the new orders popping up in town. This is the app's way of making us rushers hustle, by letting us know there are so many more money-earning opportunities awaiting us. I jumped in my car, stuck the food in its warm box, and hustled into the old house part of town. I was resolved not to wave at any kids in the window. I didn't want to even imagine a skipping ghost with me again tonight. When I pulled up past the big iron gates, I was pretty relieved not to even see a kid in the window. I jumped out, mindful of all the new jobs I had waiting for me, and hurried up to the imposing door. It was the middle-aged woman with the greasy hair again, though this time she was in a dressing gown, not a blanket. I smiled, did not comment on the kids, and handed her her food. She said a blank thanks, took it, shut the door, and I hopped back in my car. Simple. I put my car in reverse and looked in the rearview mirror to make my way back out through the gates. There was a blue plastic ball on the driveway. How it had gotten there, I don't know, but I wasn't about to run over some kid's ball. Especially not a kid who appeared to have no one for them but some woman who didn't recognize them as their kid. I jumped out, grabbed the ball, tossed it out of the way, and plopped back into my car. Ready to mark the job as complete, I spotted the instructions. You're all rolling your eyes. Partly because half of you have wished your delivery driver would just check the damn instructions for once. But yeah, you've got it. I didn't check the instructions for this job when I took it. I thought I already knew them. This instruction, though, it read, don't play with the kid. In fairness to me, I hadn't played with the kid. I just tossed the ball out of the way. It didn't make a difference. After my fourth job of the evening, I heard the laughter of a little kid. An hour later, I heard the skipping following up a front path behind me. Merry The kid's voice sang. My teeth grit. I felt prickles go down my spine. I'd been expecting it, though. Play with me. I whirled around. There was nothing there, of course. I glowered at the customer's empty front lawn, turned back to the door, and knocked. The kid stayed silent as the customer took their order and wished me a good night, and then the kid was back at it. But you played with me before. That one shook me. With an experience of this weird hallucination just disappearing by the morning, I wasn't too worried. What struck me was the sadness in the tone. It was like a 4-year-old who'd just been screamed at, stunned and hurt that someone would treat them that way. And then a soccer ball fell onto the grass right before me. I looked up. There was a tree above me. One of its branches was swaying as though a ball had just hit it, or fall out of it. It was more likely that there'd been a ball stuck up there that had just decided now was the time to fall out. My kid's ghost had gone silent. That last sad statement, and now nothing. I bent, picked up the soccer ball, and said tentatively, I've got to get onto my next job. Just one throw? Where are you at, kid? There was a silence. I took a good moment to consider whether I was going nuts. Then I heard a little giggle off to my left. I chucked the ball in that direction, shook myself, and got back into my car. No soccer ball bashed into the side of my car, thrown back to me by a kid apparition. And I was glad for that. Not just because I didn't need any more ghost or hallucination crap, but because I'd feel bad for the little kid if he did. The kid didn't ask for any more playtime after that, but he didn't leave me alone either. By midnight, I was tired and no longer questioning the odd singing, skipping, or giggling I heard following me. It was like something that could exist, sometimes, in the night. And it wasn't freaking me out so much anymore, so I just went with it. I had one last order to deliver, and then I was going to throw in the towel. A good sleep had relieved me of whatever kid ghost I'd had last time. I climbed out of my car and took an unenthusiastic look at the apartment complex before me. The instructions, yes, I was diligently reading them again, said the apartment was on the 3rd floor. When I buzzed through to the customer to be let in, I was also informed there was no lift. Puffing out a sigh, a ghost kid behind me singing a refrain of dum 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 da dum dum. I went looking for the stairs. The apartment complex was built to some modernistic ideal that had long since become dilapidated. It had a central courtyard with a tree in it, and, through glass doors, 2 indoor stairwells. The kid still singing behind me, I picked the one that led to apartment 36 and started up the stairs. They had carpet on them, and as I found out, that carpet wasn't secure. I was jogging up to the 3rd floor when a step seemed to shift under me. I went flying, and I think I hit my head because the next thing I knew, my entire body screaming out in pain was waking to an old woman shrieking at me. It took me a moment to understand what she was saying, and a moment still to remember where I was. The burgers aren't even in the bun, the old woman screeched at me, either slurring her words or my brain slurring them for her. I'm reporting you. Check my foods all over the place. Stupid cunt. Now, writing this, I'm downright furious with that woman. Your rusher was flat on their back on the landing, groggy and having just fallen down the steps, and you're screaming at them because your food got tossed around a bit. That lady took the delivery bag, still telling me off, and slammed her door shut, leaving me back down on the stairs. At the time, I was just trying to see properly. I got myself to sit up after a bit, winded and my head whirling, and leaned my head against my knees. Breathe in, slowly, and out, I directed myself. The whirling will pass. I'd completely forgotten about the kid until I heard a little whimper beside me. It freaked me out of my skin. For a long moment, I stared around wildly, trying to see the person who'd made the noise. Then I remembered. Okay, I muttered, dumping my head back on my knees and not caring if anyone heard me talking to a ghost. No one had come out of their apartments to check I was all right anyway. Don't worry about it. There was a long silence. The kid didn't pat me on the knee or anything, but I felt comforted all the same by an invisible 4-year-old. And then, I'm sorry, the kid whispered, so quietly and forlornly the tears I didn't think were coming even after getting knocked out came straight to the surface. You're okay, bud, I whispered back. It's not your fault. I woke up the next day with a continued headache. I lay there, in bed, for a long time, trying to remember how safely I'd gotten home with this concussion. Then I remembered the kid and just pondered that weird experience for a while. I didn't believe in ghosts. I didn't believe in them either. It was more like a what the hell perspective. Still, with light shining in around my curtains, in my familiar bedroom, I was glad for a return to normalcy. And it seemed this little kid carried with him some horrendous luck. I've never been screamed at more by customers than I have when working with this kid trotting after me. I've certainly never knocked myself out at work before either. Bad luck and a pang of loneliness. I'm okay with being alone. I've got no family, and I don't reach out to friends either. Or, I'm okay with it when I'm just left alone. For some reason, being around that kid reminded me of why I didn't allow myself to be in situations where the people I cared about could hurt me. I eventually got myself out of bed, downed some painkillers, and, with no appetite, proceeded to the hygiene stage of my morning. I was standing at the sink, feeling around the bump at the back of my head, when I swear I saw a little boy's face in the corner of the mirror. I yelped, spun around, my head spinning back into a throb, and stared, eyes wide, around me. The bathroom was empty, but for me. Okay, I said I'm tolerant of the idea of ghosts. But that's when they're not in my house, and not around in my normal broad daylight. There was no giggling. No singing. No skipping. My apartment was completely silent. Gradually, my breathing slowed. I was starting to wonder whether I really should see a doctor about my brain. Maybe all the loneliness truly had started to make me hallucinate. I'm sure the concussion hadn't helped much with that either. My eyes landed on a fresh tube of toothpaste sitting on the sink top. My heart sped back up again. I bought toothpaste on sale in bulk. I kept them where I had space for them, in the laundry cupboard. Yesterday morning my latest tube had proved itself thoroughly empty. I got only enough out to do a morning brush by scraping my toothbrush handle along the tube. I was just about certain I hadn't bothered to brush my teeth last night, and the extra yucky feel of my teeth this morning seemed to prove that. I also hadn't gone into the laundry to fetch out a new tube. Well, I didn't ponder that too long then. I think, if anything, I was maybe just glad to accept a ghost might have done it if that meant my brain was fine, and not evaluate the situation any more than that. I brushed my teeth, popped a few more painkillers, and went on with my day. I didn't hear or see the kid again that day, nor the next many that followed it. About the kid, I avoided thinking of him. I did notice, though, that my taste for quinoa and pesto came back. Oddly, however, my taste for whiskey had completely gone after that night. Just beer and whiskey now. I could eat kale to my heart's content, but beer was gross, and whiskey, all of a sudden, tasted like battery acid. The only times I did think of the kid were when I got orders to deliver to his house. The middle-aged lady tipped all right and always ordered before business picked up. I was never comfortable about accepting her orders, but I did, and every time I read whatever new instructions she had for me carefully. Don't touch the frisbee in the front garden. Don't look in the upstairs windows. Don't pay attention to the singing. And every time I was there, before that large and quiet house, I sort of wanted to call out to a little kid. Call out and say I've got a minute to play. But I'd long committed to a life of solitude. That kid had shit luck. It was a little freaky to be around him, and I didn't need that complication in my life. So each of the times I went there, I followed the instructions. Then, one day with the delivery for his house, as I'd long started thinking of it, I didn't get any instructions beyond the pre-fill stuff. You only see the instructions after you accept the order, and if I could have seen the dearth of instructions beforehand, I'd never have accepted it. With serious trepidation, I drove past the iron gates and parked on the driveway before the imposing old house. Just don't look around, I told myself, feeling both jumpy and guilty, as I always did at this house. Don't touch any toys. Don't react to any sign of a kid. I made my delivery, the middle-aged woman looking just as she always did, with uncaring brown eyes, unclean hair, and prominent cheekbones, and got back in my car. I breathed a low sigh. There'd been zero sign of the kid. I was relieved. And, at the same time, I was sad. What if the ghost kid, facing ongoing neglect, had gone? Moved off to the land of nothing? Poor little kid. And then I saw my phone, and all my sadness instantly disappeared. Provided not as delivery instructions, but in a text sent 5 minutes after the order had been booked, was the message, "Don't drive through the gates. Park on the street and call me to come out." Oh, come on. I cried as a little giggle sounded on the seats behind me. So I had a skipping, singing, giggling little kid with me again that night. I was extra careful, expecting bad luck at every turn. After my 6th delivery, to a guy living in a garage down a dark back street behind weatherboard houses, I trod carefully, keeping an eye out for, I dunno, a rock I'd fall over. Mary, play with me? I took a deep breath. It was still a bit creepy to have a ghost kid call out to you like that in a badly lit back street in the middle of the night. "What do you want to play with?" I asked. There was a giggle, and then a stone, likely from the side of the crumbling street, was skipped along the cracked asphalt to my feet. Tossing stones? I didn't remember playing that as a kid, but I scooped the stone up anyway, asked, "Where are you, bud?" and skipped the stone back in the direction of the tinkling laughter. Back and forth we skipped that stone, the kids' laughter getting wilder and more excited before I had to warn, "I do have to get on with work, kid." 5 more? The kid didn't push it. He giggled his way through all 5 of those turns, then just went silent and let me climb back in my car. I got shouted at by customers several times that night, but thankfully didn't crack my head open on anything. I made it back to my apartment in the early hours of the morning with an invisible singing kid, as far as I could tell, in my back seat. I think he just stayed in the car or went wherever he did when he left me alone. I woke up late the next day and played some games on my computer. On a few occasions, I thought I heard some singing, but it was over the sound of my game. And you know how it is when you expect to hear something? Waiting for a phone call and you think you hear it in the music you're playing in the background. Or scared of hearing the doorbell go, so you keep imagining it. I thought it was like that. I imagined hearing the kid. He didn't ask me to play with him or anything, so I felt I was in the clear when I plopped back in my car and signed into the Rusher app. The lady at the kid's house wasn't someone I knew of as an everyday customer. But there she was, ordering something again that early evening. With fewer misgivings than usual, I accepted the order and scrolled through the app until I found the button for delivery instructions. I frowned down at them. Don't let the kid in. He's not to pass the gates. I imagined a poor little ghost kid sitting outside wanting to come in. The idea made me unreasonably sad. I hoped that wasn't the case. Once again, I collected the order and headed off. I even rolled down my windows and listened carefully, driving slowly as I approached the kid's house. Listening for a crying kid, maybe. Listening for something. I've read enough of the stories on this subreddit to have sat behind my screen groaning, don't. Come on, man. You know how this works. You know that this is all going to go wrong if you don't follow the rules. But here I was, periodically haunted by a ghost kid, knowing letting a sad little ghost kid into the house's grounds would mean another night's haunting, and I wasn't really against it. I almost wanted it, despite my misgivings, the bad luck, and how it occasionally creeped me out. But I didn't hear the little kid. I didn't see anything either when I looked in my wing mirrors just in case he appeared in those. Weirdly disappointed, I parked in the driveway. And then I heard the giggle. I whipped around. Nothing there. Bud, I complained, were you there this whole time? He crowed with laughter, the tinkling sound, despite it all, making me snicker. I just hoped the little ghost kid wasn't going to go evil poltergeist on me. And I wasn't too sure about him sticking around all the time. I never signed up to be a nanny to a ghost child forevermore. Well, fuck, I'd screwed up with those instructions too, but as I got out of the car to deliver the order, I only minded a bit. At least the sadness I'd been wary of feeling wasn't there. The woman took her order without comment, and the kid sang quietly in the back of the car as I drove away. The next request for me to play came after a delivery by an ornamental park with a fountain. I'd agreed to the request when I heard the kid's laughter running away from me into the park. Deciding why the hell not, I ran after him, only to get splashed in the face by fountain water. He loved the game, me flicking water back at his tinkling laughter and trying to dodge splashes sent at me by a kid I couldn't see. That wasn't easy, but though I got damped, there was something nice in hearing him have such a good time with so simple a game. Once again, the kid was amenable to me telling him I had to get back to work. He hummed away in the car behind me as I collected, then set off to deliver the next order. The delivery instructions on this one were to hand the order to the customer and nothing else. Before a slightly shabby weatherboard house, normal on a street of them, I stopped the car and pulled the order out of the warm box. Don't knock on the door. I started, going still while leaning over the center console with the order bag in my hand. The kid had never sounded that serious. He'd never given me an instruction either. It sent chills up my spine like I was suddenly being shown the ghost kid wasn't all I thought he was. What's up, bud? I asked, uneasy. There was a short silence, then, don't knock on his door. Leave it and come back. Jittering a little, I swallowed and got out of the car with the bag. I was no longer so sure about my ghost kid, but I hesitated on the front steps. The house looked perfectly normal. I'd walked along dark back streets and the driveways of sour gorilla men with this kid. The kid had never spoken up like that those times. Marie. The kid cried at me from the car behind me. Don't go, don't knock. For some reason, his cry brought tears to my eyes. Come back. He cried at me, getting upset and, from the sounds of it, starting to bang on the car window. See, come back at me. So I dashed up 2 steps, left the food on the top one by the door, and raced back to the car, flinging myself into it and starting up the engine. I saw the front door open as I peeled away from the house. "It's okay, bud," I said, driving away. "It's okay." But there was no answer. I thought they'd been crying in the back seat when I'd launched back into the car, but it was gone now. My eyes welled up properly as I pulled up, blocks away from the house. I didn't mark the food as delivered just yet. "Bud?" I asked, looking behind me. "You still there?" There was no response. Nothing. Not even singing. "Bud?" I tried again, a tear spilling out of my eye. "Want to play?" Somehow, I think I knew he wouldn't respond. It was a very lonely night for me after that, and a very lonely day after that night. The woman at the kids' house didn't order food again. One evening, I drove onto the driveway of the big old house without an order, hoping, once I'd passed the iron gates, that I'd see something I shouldn't do, just so I could do it. But the kid didn't reappear. I haven't heard him, haven't seen signs of him, for a while now. I did see the newspapers though. A few weeks ago, on the night I'd made that last delivery with the kid, a female rusher was badly assaulted by a man in town. She made it was, per the papers, in a stable condition, though I'm sure not without lasting trauma. The man was arrested, drunk and swearing, the next day. Today, the reason I'm posting is because I found an older article in our local newspaper archives. You can say I've become a little obsessed with this, and the digging took hours. But I found something. 15 years ago, a man was charged with murder and domestic abuse. In a fit of intoxicated blind rage, he'd smashed his only son, a 4-year-old boy, through an upstairs window of their house. The boy had died. The mother had been treated for injuries. And there was a picture in a later article about the court case of the mom. She had unwashed brown hair, brown eyes with heavy lids, and prominent cheekbones. I'm a food delivery driver. It seems I have a habit of picking up strays. I'm a food delivery driver, and I'm calling myself a rusher here so I don't reveal which service I work for. Oh, and my name's Marie. I live and work in a small town with a normal side filled with small weatherboard houses and people who leave their homes to be social or take in the air, and the less normal side that has the big, older houses and antisocial people. It was in that older part of town that I met my little bud. I should probably live in the old part of town, as I'm pretty asocial myself. I don't have any family, and I don't seek out friends. Blame it on a bit of past trauma, maybe, but I like my life to be as uncomplicated as possible. I don't have money for the old part of town, though, so instead I live in a dull one-bedroom apartment that's my safe corner of the world. Only. Well, it's been some weeks since I last saw my little bud. And I'll admit, I miss him. Anyway, there are still too few rushers for a town that's catching on to the food delivery trend. It was my second order of the day, an early dinner, for a big old house I'd never been to before. The tip didn't end up turning out that good, but I was right next to the Chinese place they were ordering from, so went to collect the order with only a small degree of grump. Ever since my little bud left, I have driven listening to music. I guess it makes the car seem less lonely. So, singing along in a loud ho-ho-hee-ho-hee hi-hey-dee-hey-dee-ree, it's some weird Viking stuff. I've got no idea what they're saying. I turned onto the correct street and started checking street numbers. The delivery instructions, I read them always now, just said, hand it to me. I found the number and got a pleasant surprise. I call this part of town antisocial because what I was looking at was a sight you never see here. 3 kids, 2 on scooters and the youngest on a ride-on train toy, were zooming around their driveway and out onto the sidewalk. I turned down my music and the kids moving aside with their toys pulled into their driveway. Nice to see you guys playing out here, I remarked, getting out of the car with their dinner. The littlest one just stared up at me, her soft blonde hair and pigtails. The eldest boy looked sheepish like I was telling him off. The middle one, though, pulled a big shrug of 7-ish-year-old shoulders. "Mom's saging the house," he said. "She told us to go play." The eldest shot him a look, then said to me, "We're supposed to come in when you get here." "Well, I've got Chinese for you," I said, leading the kiddie troop to the front door. I was sure it was unlocked, with the kids out here, but I wasn't just going to barge in. I rang the doorbell. It took a couple of minutes of standing awkwardly with the kids on their doorstep before a flustered-looking woman yanked the door open. Her cheeks were flushed, and she was still holding a burning bundle of sage in one hand. In case you didn't read the first post, I at least try not to judge. "You were fast," she said to me, eyeing the food bag I was holding. It sounded less like she was impressed with my rushing promptness, and more like she was irritated I was already there. "We try to be," I told her, my best customer service smile in place, and held out her food. The lady took it, but she was distracted by something behind me. "Don't you dare pet that cat," she snapped. I looked around. The middle child had frozen, halfway towards petting a fluffy gray and white cat that was standing, back arched for a scratch, beside the kid. Where the cat came from, I've got no idea, but he looked pretty clean and friendly. The kid slowly retracted his hand. "Coming now," the woman barked, beckoning her kids with 2 fingers. The rest were holding the bag, and her other hand was still wafting a bunch of burning sage. "Dinner." The eldest and youngest dutifully skirted past me and into the house. The woman had left the door open, leading the kids to the kitchen. The middle child gave the cat a last, longing look. "Not your cat?" I asked him. The boy shrugged again. "Mom doesn't like cats," he told me, and followed his siblings into the house. He shut the door at his mother's yell to do so. I was left on the doorstep with a fluffy cat who was still just standing there, though it had eased its back to a more neutral stance. Call me a sucker, but watching the cat blink slowly, then lower its butt to the ground and sit, just staring at the door shut in its face, made me think it looked forlorn. I'm not a cat person. I've never had a cat. I don't know cats beyond what I see on the internet. But I gave in, stooped, and scratched its fluffy head. From the mom's reaction, I half expected it to fly, suddenly, into a rage and scratch my arms to ribbons. It didn't, but the cat did pull its head back to sniff my fingers first. Satisfied I didn't smell evil, it bowed its head for a scratch. A scratch the cat, from its enthusiastic response, loved. All over its head I scratched, the cat directing the petting by moving its head into my fingers. Then it stood up, arched its back, and I scratched down it. It got the cat purring in a loud way, like it was begging for more. It started winding back and forth, getting me to restart my scratching, purring all the while, and bonking its head on my leg in what I assumed was an affectionate gesture. And it got me feeling how skinny the furry thing was. Just looking at it, you'd think the cat was well-fed. But under all that fluffy fur, the poor thing was just skin and bones. Telling myself I had work to do, I pulled myself away. But I sat in my car looking back at the cat for a long moment before I cranked the engine over it. That cat had sat back down and was looking at me. Sadly, I thought. It wasn't my cat, I told myself. It didn't have a collar, but it could be a neighbor's cat. Maybe it was just so friendly it wanted all people to love it. So I drove off, and my life continued as normal for a while. Until I had to think about that cat again because I accepted another 6 p.m. dinner delivery at their house. They tipped better this time. It was raining, so I wasn't surprised to see the kids weren't out playing that day. I was surprised, though, to see a beat-up old car in the driveway. For houses like these, grand and prestigious, the car looked like an anomaly. And, rather than surprised, I was just saddened to see the cat still there. It was sitting right on the doorstep, out of the rain. It looked up at me with big innocent eyes as I hurried from my car to the door. This cat, I said to the woman when she yanked open the door, no sage this time. Is it yours? The woman did look at the cat, but she looked away quickly. Her lips pinched into a disapproving line. No, she answered shortly. I was overstepping my role, I knew that. But the cat had stood up and was looking like it wanted to slip past the woman into the house. She moved a foot to bar its entry. I was still holding her food. My delivery wasn't finished until I followed instructions and handed it to her. Is it a neighbor's? If possible, the woman's lips had thinned even more. No, she snapped, holding her hand out for the food. If you must know, it was my mother's. The woman was then distracted by a loud thump from inside the house. It was accompanied by the sound of glass shattering. The woman whirled around. Benny, she screeched. What was that? There was a beat of silence. Then what sounded like the eldest child called back, I don't know, Mom. We weren't doing anything. The littlest started to cry. I heard a man start to soothe her. Harried, the woman whipped back to face me. Can I have my food? She said coldly. Hesitantly, I handed it to her. The woman snatched her food and went to shut the door. She paused, glanced at the cat, then glowered at me. Don't pet it, she said, then shut the door. I was probably going to get a bad review from her. Knowing that, right there on her doorstep, I bent down and petted the cat. Once again, the cat seemed to love it. It didn't even need to sniff to make sure I wasn't evil this time. And when I turned to head back to my car, it followed me. The little, skinny, fluffed up, and cold thing trotted after me when I hurried off the step. I slammed my car door shut with it standing outside in the rain, having followed me right to my door. It's not yours, I told myself, feeling like a sack of shit. It's not your cat. You have no reason to care for it. And what was I going to do anyway? Take the cat in? Give it a nice home? It wasn't my cat, and I didn't know how to care for it. I like to tell myself I have a heart of stone, but it's not true. By my last job of the day, I was still thinking of that hungry, lonely, sad cat out there in the chill and rain. A cat who'd followed after me, purring. And I still felt like a sack of shit. So I went back. I finished my last order and went back. Parked on the side of the road 1 house down from the cat's place at 1 in the morning, I took a moment to think. Was I planning on stealing someone's cat? They wouldn't miss it anyway. Not the mom. The middle child might, but he wasn't allowed to pet it. I was pretty sure I wasn't allowed to have a cat in my apartment. Fuck it, I thought, and got out of my car. I'd at least go look. If the cat wasn't there, I'd leave, my decision made for me. If it was, the cat had packaged itself up neatly on the doorstep, all paws tucked in under it. I saw it by the light from the street lamps, The porch light was off, and the cat spotted me. With a heart-wrenching meow, it hopped up and, despite the continued rains, trotted up to me. Down at shin height, it bumped its head against my leg, wound its way around, and bumped me again. Its fur started up, loud in the quiet night. So I'm a catnapper. I gave in, hoisted the long and skinny cat up, and hurried back to my car, hoping no one was looking out their windows. That would be an even worse review. Or, potentially, a police matter. I stole a cat, I whispered to myself, sitting in the driver's seat and staring out at the scene of the crime. On the passenger seat beside me, the cat mewed. It was a good car mate. I'd half expected it to bound up onto the dashboard and block my view or get itself under the pedals, but it just lay down on the passenger seat and, every time I reached over to pet the damp fur, purred. Back in my apartment with a fuzzy gray and white cat looking up at me, I'd smuggled it in under my coat. I tried to figure out what to feed it. Lemon and cracked pepper. I considered the tin of tuna. It didn't sound right for a cat. Chili, nope. Big round eyes stared up at me. I stared back. Do you eat stir fry? The cat blinked. I took it as a no. In the back of my cupboard, I eventually found a tin of regular tuna in brine and gave the cat half. I needed something to feed it in the morning. The cat ate it all up with gusto, obviously starved. I improvised kitty litter with a cut-up and duct-taped cereal box lined with newspapers and filled with the soil from a potted cactus I'd managed to kill by forgetting to water it. Doubting, once again, my ability to care for a cat, I did remember to put out water for it. I'll get you all the things in the morning, I promised the cat, hoping it understood to poop in the box of dirt only. And if you want me to return you to that house, scratch at the front door. In addition to getting all the things, and after I checked my bank balance, I took the cat to the vet. You're going to make me work harder to pay for this, I told it before scooping the cat off the passenger seat and carrying it into the vet's, ignoring all the frowns from people as I just held it slung over my shoulder in the waiting room. The cat wasn't complaining. What's his name? The vet asked me. This was a bit of a revelation, me having started thinking the cat was female. I ran through names in my head. Clement, I offered. So now I have a rescued stray cat called Clement. He's about 12 or 13, by the vet's guess, and, though undernourished, otherwise in generally fine fettle. You can call me out, I'm a big softie. Clement quickly degraded into Lemmy, and I quickly started to enjoy seeing him when I got home from my deliveries. The cat showed me just how love-deprived he'd been, following me around, mewing to me from the kitchen stool as I cooked, snoozing on my lap when I gamed, and curling up against me every night. Though he had a habit of knocking things off the coffee table or my desk when he wanted attention, he was otherwise a model house guest. And, back then, I could find no reason why the woman had been so anti him. I even started to consider taking Lenny out for my deliveries as a companion, but I didn't want to get caught out in the neighborhood I'd napped him from. So I continued with my mad Viking music and looked forward to going home more than I used to. I got no more delivery orders from Lemmy's original home, and for that I was glad. I did get a 1-star review that called me rude from the woman, but it said nothing about cat stealing, and in a town with few rushers, it didn't matter. I was coming out of the bathroom one morning when I heard a thump and a crash from my living room come dining room. Lemmy? I called, running over in my towel. The cat was sitting on the coffee table, calm but alert. The TV had toppled right over, off its stand, and face down onto the floor. Lemmy, what did you do? I complained, losing grip on my towel as I went to haul the TV back up and check for damage. It worked all right, I found, though one corner of the plastic frame had popped out from its backing. I asked, irritated, and asked the cat not to bounce off the electronics. He stared back at me. In fairness, he wasn't known for doing that. Plus, I was telling him off in the buff, so I didn't feel I had much superiority. Ergo, I let it slide and gave him a pet he appreciated. The next night, though, I came home to all my herb and spice jars knocked off their shelf and rolling on the floor, oregano everywhere. Lemmy must have had one hell of a party on my spice shelf. This time I did give him a stern talking to, while he stared back at me, and resolved to buy him some cat toys in the hope they'd help get his energy out. The older cat, however, turned out to only play for a minute or two before flopping over and starting to groom himself. Well, I said, putting the one toy aside, I tried to tire you out. Don't knock things over, mister. My attempt seemed to work. I got home that night to the house as I'd left it. Feeling like I was making progress in the cat owner thing, I went to sleep pleased. And I woke up, startled, to a loud wham followed by a clattering. It sounded like it was coming from my kitchen. Lemmy! I groaned, blinking hard to get my eyes to work and pushing up onto an elbow. What did you do? And then I noticed the cat, floppy with sleep, was pinning the blankets down between my legs. He was lying down, but had picked his head up to stare towards my bedroom door. Icy prickles went down my spine. If the cat hadn't done it, then. A moment frozen in horror, then I slid myself out of the bed around Lemmy and tiptoed over to the door. I poked my head out, my heart hammering, looking for some creepy-ass intruder. The main room was clear, so, darting over to grab Lemmy's new scratching post for a weapon, I carried on into the kitchen and, taking a deep breath, peeked into the room. My toaster was on the floor, but the room was empty, and so was the bathroom. I checked all the cupboards, my front door, and the windows, all clear of intruders or locked. So I went back to the toaster. Even if Lemmy hadn't been sleeping on me, there was no way he could have done this. The toaster had been flung so hard across the kitchen that it had left a dent in my fridge. Another chill went down my spine. I tolerate ghosts like I tolerate spiders. I don't mind so long as they're not in my home. And a violent ghost, if that was what this was a far worse thing to have in my home than a spider. My last ghost hadn't been violent. Lemmy had followed me into the kitchen. He'd sat down just outside the door and was staring into the middle of the kitchen, seemingly at nothing. Lemmy? I whispered. He glanced at me, though only briefly, returning his eyes to the thin air in the middle of the room. Then his gaze moved, as though tracking something that passed by me and into the main room of my apartment. He shifted around and peered that way. Goosebumps rose all up my arms and into my hairline. Lemmy, I said again, my voice hushed. Can cats see ghosts? The cat glanced at me, blinked, then went back to staring into the main room. I eased out of the kitchen and peered where he was. I don't think I was expecting to see the ghost. I'd only caught rare glimpses of little Bud, and only through glass or in the mirror. I was more dreading it'd go and throw something else. I was more than ready to jump right out of my skin if it did. Nothing there, and though I stood petrified for a long moment, nothing more got thrown. A shudder went down my spine. I looked back to Lemmy. He'd stopped staring at something invisible. Lifting his paw, he started grooming his face. It's gone then, is it? I whispered to him. He didn't look up, but I took the fact that he flopped over to groom his belly as an indication. My shoulders eased somewhat, then I got a new thought. Lemmy, I said, wary, did you bring the ghost here? He started grooming his crotch. Great. Well, now I had a cat and a violent ghost, whether Lemmy was the reason for both or not. But though I tread warily around my house for the rest of the time before I headed out for deliveries, nothing more got thrown. And for the first time since I got Lemmy, I was less than looking forward to going home. I got to my door at about 1:30 in the morning. With trepidation, I opened the door and looked in. Lemmy, as usual, came trotting toward me, meowing a greeting. I patted him and searched the house. Everything was normal until I reached my bedroom. Every drawer in my dresser had been yanked out. Clothes were tossed all over the place, a scattering of drawers decorating my bed and floor. "Oh, shit," I uttered, staring at the mess. Having used up my savings on cat stuff and with no friends to go to, I curled up with Lemmy on the couch that night, a lamp left on. None of that would stop a violent ghost, but my bedroom was too spooky to enter right then. I'd started to take Lemmy as an indication of whether a ghost was about or not. If he was snoozing, grooming, or paying attention to anything that wasn't an invisible house guest, I figured all was currently clear in the apartment. I watched him on tenterhooks for any indication he had something I couldn't see to watch. It had taken me ages to fall asleep, and when I did it was more an uneasy drowsing. I was snapped abruptly awake by the sound of a blind rolling up with a loud whir and clack. I sat straight up on the couch and stared as, at the next window over, the blind appeared to yank itself, then rolled right up to reveal early morning daylight outside. A second later, the last blind followed the other two. And then there was silence. My heart was thundering. Barely breathing, I looked over at Lemmy. Sat on the floor by the couch, he watched something move over to my bedroom door. And then, from my bedroom, came the sound of my curtains being thrown violently aside, the rings skidding and clattering on their rail. My eyes pinched shut at the last sound, my bathroom blind being yanked up. When I opened them, Lemmy was staring at something across the main room. I saw nothing, but something was there. "I haven't done anything to you," I shouted at it. Perhaps because it made me feel a little less scared. "Don't take your shit out on me. And it's your fault I was up late. You're freaking me out. And now you wake me up early? Asshole. Chill with you?" I got no response, and for that I was glad. If it had thrown something else, like I pissed it off, I might well have shat my pants. But eventually, Lemmy blinked, turned around, and hopped up onto the couch with me. He settled himself on my lap and started purring. "You know, mister," I muttered to him, giving him a pet, "if you brought some grouchy ghost into my home, I'm going to reconsider keeping you." It was an empty threat, and Lemmy wasn't concerned. He shut his eyes and purred happily. But I figured I now better understood why the woman at Lemmy's old house had relegated the cat to the outside. My fear abetted faster by the light of day. I spent ages tidying up my room and got a load of laundry washed, dried, and into its basket for when I finally got around to folding it. "Don't let grouchy ghost hurt you," I warned Lemmy on my way out. "Hide somewhere safe if it's in a throwing mood." The cat had followed me to the door. He sat and just watched me as I shut the door. I steeled myself and went off to earn enough to support the two of us, and hopefully make a bit more in case the ghost busted my fridge or something. I was glad to see Lemmy was fine when I got home, trotting to the door to greet me as usual. I trod slowly into my apartment, looking around. The blinds the ghost had so viciously thrown open that morning had been pulled shut. It wasn't me who'd done that, but it seemed a benevolent action on the part of the ghost, so I carried on, not sure I wanted to see what had happened to my bedroom this time. Cautiously, I peeked into the room. All my drawers were shut on my bed as I'd left it. But the curtains, like the blinds, were shut, and on my bed was my basket of laundry. I'd left that last one balanced on top of the dryer. Okay, I said, more speaking to myself than anything. Lemmy wasn't currently looking at a ghost, so I didn't think it was there right now. Thank you for chilling, I began. That was nice. I appreciate it. And, thanks for closing all the blinds and curtains. I'm going to take that as a sign of apology for freaking me out. Nodding in agreement with my own words, I calmed myself down enough to get ready for bed. A nice ghost wasn't too bad. It did make me consider becoming a never nude, though. I simply never wanted to be naked around a ghost, and I don't think many people would disagree with that stance. Your friend's a pain, I told Lemmy, tucking myself in for sleep. I hope you realize that. He closed his eyes, curled in beside me, and rested his fluffy head on a paw. Once again, I was woken by the sound of blinds being pulled up. Though I sat straight up and my heart ratcheted up to racing, I wasn't as scared as I had been the previous morning. Maybe part of that was me getting used to it. The other part was that each of the 3 blinds went up with less snapping force than they had before. I watched Lemmy, and Lemmy, sitting beside me, watched the ghost as it came into my room, rounded my bed, and pushed, reasonably gently, my curtains open. Good morning, I said to it, trying to treat it all as something to be perfectly calm about. I glanced at my bedside clock. 9:30 on the dot. That was better than yesterday. Lemmy was still watching the invisible curtain opener, so I continued, thanks for letting me sleep in. I could have done with another hour, though. I'm still sleep deprived and I get home late. I didn't cop a drawer to my face, so I assumed the ghost wasn't too irritated by that. By Lemmy's gaze, they moved around the bottom of my bed and, making me scrabble suddenly backward along the bed, hoisted the laundry basket right up and dumped it where I'd been lying. Lemmy hopped off the bed and followed the ghost out. I stared at the laundry basket. I called out, scrambling out of bed to follow Lemmy and the ghost. Okay, I'll fold my laundry. I'd appreciate it if you were less, forward about it, though. Hoping it wouldn't start throwing things again, I still jumped a bit when the bathroom blind went up. Good, I said, my voice a bit jittery. All the blinds are up. I don't get around to that always. The fridge pulled open. Peeking into the kitchen, I watched the orange juice I never drink dump itself on the countertop. The fridge shut. And I'll drink that, I agreed. If it's not expired. Lemmy watched the ghost come out of the kitchen. There was a moment of nothing, and then Lemmy turned, trotted to the apartment door, sat, and started scratching it. I frowned at him. He'd never done that before. And then I remembered asking him to do it if ever he wanted me to return him to his original home. I shook that thought off. He was just a cat. Cats didn't follow instructions. I hadn't once thought Lemmy was even understanding a thing I said to him. He was probably just wanting to go outside. He had lived outside for a while. Perhaps he was simply sick of pooping in pellets and wanted a nice hedgerow to crap in. As I had in the garden. I could look into cat leashes. Anyway, there was no way I was returning him to be hungry and shut outside in the rain again. Come on, mister, I said, going into the kitchen. I'll give you breakfast while I drink my orange juice. I said the last part a bit louder so the ghost would hear. I came home after my deliveries to all the window shades, once again, pulled down or shut. And the dirty dishes I'd left in the sink had been dumped on my bed. All right, I muttered to the empty apartment. I'll do the dishes. The blinds being yanked up woke me again the next morning. I rolled over and looked at my clock. 10:30, thank you. I called to the ghost. The days settled into a weird new normal. I had to buy a new toaster, but the ghost didn't break anything more in my house, and for that, I was willing to treat it with politeness. Even if the fussy, uninvited, invisible guest did have a problem with dirty dishes, unfolded laundry, and the hole in my favorite pair of jeans. Over 2 nights I came home to it dumped on my bed, the hole prominent, until I grumbled and got out needle and thread, just to make the ghost shut up about it. Weirdly, I did start getting used to it, though I got irritated when the ghost tossed out my toothbrush, which had been a bit past its use by. It left me without a toothbrush and in need of buying a new one. I know you're persnickety about household chores, I snapped at the apartment, but this is my home, and I don't appreciate you checking my toothbrush out. I got no response, but the ghost left 2 dishes in the sink the next day. Feeling we were finding a compromise, I grew just a bit more comfortable in my new weird reality. Until, while driving and yelling along with a weaving refrain that went like 1 te grila 1 de siagras teen yin de grassleen. Again, don't speak that language. I got loud and angry with you shut that racket up from my back seat. I just about hit a telephone pole. Swerving, tires skidding, I only just missed it, but did make a bouncy detour over the curb and onto the sidewalk. I pulled the parking brake, turned off my music, and just sat there to the sound of the engine running, both hands gripping the steering wheel as I stared out at the road accident that could have happened. Then I turned around, glowered at the empty back seat, and yelled, "What the fuck?" I could have killed myself. There was a harumph from my empty back seat. "Oh, you don't think so?" I snapped. "This car's old. It doesn't have all the new safety stuff. I bet it doesn't even have airbags." A sullen silence filled the back of the car. I'm not good with ghosts screaming at me suddenly from my back seat. I reeled on. "I'm just trying to earn a damn living. If you care about that cat, you'll avoid scaring the hell out of me while I'm driving. And I don't earn enough for car repairs." His name's Fluffmaster. I blinked. The voice was raspy, like that of an old woman. And it was just such a ridiculous statement. "What?" I said, gesticulating like a flustered maniac. "His name," the old woman wheezed at me, "is Fluffmaster." "Well, that's a stupid name," I retorted. "I like Lemmy better." There was a long silence before, finally, the ghost gave a conciliatory, "I don't mind Clement." "Good," I said, turning back to the wheel. "You call him that." "I'll call him Lemmy." Though the old woman huffed, she didn't respond. Glad to find I hadn't blown a tire, I eased the car back onto the road and set off to complete my current delivery, this time in silence. I was still grumpy about it when I returned to my car to get ready for the next order. "Do you enjoy this work?" I stiffened, though I'd known the ghost was likely still there. "It's simple," I said defensively, "and I usually get to listen to my music while I do it." The old woman let me mark my last delivery as complete, then asked, "What was that racket?" "Viking rock," I answered. "Viking what?" "Wonderful Scandinavian head-banging music." "I don't like it." "I do." An impasse reached, and I set off to collect the new order in silence, my mind churning. Old woman ghost, the woman at Lemmy's old house, had said the cat was her mother's. I put the two together. Getting over my disgruntlement, I broke the silence with a, "So what do I call you?" I'm assuming you wouldn't like fussy and violent ghosts. The old woman again took a moment to answer. "You can call me Nan. You're not my grandmother." "No," she shot back, "but my name is Nancy." "Oh, okay," I thought, nodding. "And I'd like it if someone did," Nancy said brusquely. I assumed, though, that there was an edge of sadness to it. You must know, she went on, I didn't mean to startle you. You terrified the shit out of me. I'd expected her to call me up on my swearing like I thought grandmothers did. But she just huffed. And you broke my toaster, I added. I could almost hear the defensive pride in the silence she left. Then she sighed. That was not me, she said. What does that mean? It was the anger, Nancy snapped. It's infuriating, being banished. It takes time to come back, and when I come back I'm annoyed. I remembered the woman and her sage. That explained a bit. Maybe I should try sage? Nah, I decided. I'd rather have a waspish Nancy to deal with than a toaster smasher. I will thank you for caring for it. Clement, Nancy said stiffly. My son-in-law would put food out for him on occasion, but he needs more than that. That I could agree with. I returned to Kurt that's okay, and drove on. I felt less bad about stealing the cat now I had the erstwhile owner's approval, however weirdly that had been provided. It was on my next delivery, done in silence, that Nancy spoke up again. Might you drop me off at my house? By that, I assumed she meant where her daughter now lived. Do you need me to take you there? I asked, unsure. Can't you just pop over? I do not think so, Nancy said. I followed Clement. Yet Lemmy wasn't in the car. You haunt your cat? I asked. Yes, Marie, she said, I do. And I assumed she haunted me now too. I detoured, heading into the old house section of town. You want to visit your daughter? I asked. I wish to visit my grandchildren, she corrected. You know you're going to freak them out, right? It is better, she shot back. They hear me wish them a good night, then they see a mirror fall off the wall all on its own. That I could agree with. I stopped the house away from Lemmy's old home and received a thank you from Nancy. When I asked if she was still in the back of my car, she didn't respond, so I turned back up my music and carried on. She was back shoving my curtains open at 11 the next morning. How are the grandkids? I asked, flopping back onto my bed as Lemmy purred. Benny and Sarah will take some time to get used to it, Nancy responded in eerie disembodied voice in my room. But Sam enjoyed me reading him a bedtime story. I guessed Sam was the middle kid. Nancy joined me again that evening for some deliveries before asking to be dropped off at her old house. Then again the night after that, and soon it became a routine. She didn't bother me while I was gaming or sleeping, though, and after some stilted discussion, she agreed to leave my bedroom as a me area where I was responsible for opening my curtains. And, after I spotted a brief appearance in the bathroom mirror of an elderly lady with short-cut white hair, and after I freaked out about privacy, Nancy also agreed to stay out of the bathroom while I was in there. However, she did tell me my jeans were ratty and that I should get new ones. So your daughter's not so comfortable with having a ghost in the house? I said, broaching the subject, after a week of delivering Nancy to her grandkids every night. There was one of Nancy's protracted silences. Then she said, my daughter killed me. I nearly ran a red. Breaking hard, I said, oh. Really? I was in palliative care, Nancy said. I wanted to see Benny be born. She wanted the house. So she overdosed me on my palliative medications. I grimaced at the red light. But ghosts were around because of unfinished business, right? Do you, I said slowly, want me to go to the cops with anything? No, Nancy said. I just wish to see my grandchildren. She was silent for a moment, then added, my daughter is who she is. But my grandchildren can grow up right. The light going green, I took the turn towards Nancy's old house. "They should know me like this rather than wasting away in my bed," Nancy said as I pulled up. "Thank you." And I listened to my music for the rest of the night. "What about Queen?" she asked the next day as I set off for the first order of the evening. "Everybody likes Queen." I pulled up at the Indian restaurant and opened the app on my phone. Finding Queen, I put them on. "How's that Nan?" I asked. "Better," she said. So now I've got a cat called Lemmy and a crotchety Nan who thankfully respects my privacy rules. I still like to think of myself as a loner. Why I quit delivering food. I've been dash delivering for a few months now and enjoy the freedom of not having a boss order me around. I can play whatever music I want in my car, take jobs I want and skip the ones that tip poorly. I'm not saving much due to gas costs, but I am saving and I was enjoying seeing new places and meeting new people. That changed after I received a notification for $150 paying delivery. Immediately, I swiped accept and then pulled over to read it. I first expected this to be some out-of-state delivery to some rich individual longing for some Michelin-rated specialty. I regretted not checking the distance first, and after reading the address, I found it was a bit out in the sticks, but still very much worth the easy $150. I sighed with relief and pressed the GPS button to bring up the map to a restaurant named Danny's that I'd not previously heard of. The sun was setting early, as it does in October, and I had my lights on by the time I made it to a less populated corner of town where the restaurant was located. Dinner brings the best tips, but I hate driving at night since it's harder to find restaurants without a boldly emblazoned logo lit up in neon. That, and I've always harbored some lurking fear of a delivery-turned-mugging, or worse, some gang-initiated killing. Rare as it is, it has happened. "You have arrived at your destination," the soothing voice of the GPS alerted me. I slowed to a stop, confused. I was on a dark, residential street with no sign of a restaurant in sight. Where Danny's was supposed to be was a dark gap between two homes. I checked it again, even typing the restaurant name into maps outside of the delivery app, but nothing popped up. I realized then it might have been a glitch. In retrospect, $150 for a 30-minute delivery sounded too good to be true. I sighed and began searching the app for the troubleshooting menu when a loud slap on my passenger side window caused me to jump in my skin. A man stood outside my car, his hand pressed against the pane. I rolled down the window with only a crack, just enough to hear him. "You the delivery driver?" he asked, and my mouth went dry. I didn't want to say yes because the vision of a pistol pulled and a muzzle flash kept playing in my mind. But he seemed harmless enough, older too. Mid-50s, receding hairline, thin frame. Not quite the gang initiation type. I was fairly certain everyone knew that delivery drivers nowadays don't carry cash. "Yeah, I'm looking for Danny's restaurant. Is it near here?" The man just looked at me with a hollow stare before raising his other hand. The fear of an impending bullet to the brain immediately dissipated when I saw a large plastic bag. I sighed out in relief and lowered the window, accepting the delivery. It was large, much larger than I was used to delivering. I typically receive a styrofoam container or two, and a drink as well. This plastic bag contained a stapled paper, one filled out nearly to the top. I needed to use both hands to accept it. I placed the surprisingly heavy meal on the passenger seat, staring at it for a moment before looking up again. "Thank you." My words tapered off as I realized the man was already a few yards back. I watched him disappear into the shadow-filled gap between houses. I had no idea where he was going or where he had come from. Dark curiosity led me back to the app to see what I was even delivering. My confusion only heightened when I read the order. Denny's, it simply said where cheeseburger, fries, and the like would typically be listed for me to check off upon pickup. Despite the questions that kept tugging at my resolve, $150 for this awkward delivery was the overpowering factor. I swiped the slide after pickup bottom bar to continue the delivery. The GPS once again popped up, and I stared at the large green areas encompassing the pinpoint. My insides squirmed a bit at the revelation. The delivery address seemed to be dead in the middle of the woods. I shifted into drive and followed the directions onto the highway. The sun had fully set, but the tunes from the radio had kept me in good spirits. Few people were on the road, so I was making a great time and could call it an early night after this gig. The miles counted down from 15 to 10 to 5. The off-ramp came into view, and the large pine trees on either side of the highway continued to darken the path as I merged onto smaller roads. With every mile further into the wilderness, my uneasiness grew. More than a few times my eyes darted over to the suspicious double-bag delivery on my seat. My heart raced as my mind played tricks on me in the shrouding darkness of the tall trees on either side. I did a double take when I thought I saw the bag rustle. Something within appeared to have moved. The last turn on the GPS signaled for me to take a left. It was a turn off of the paved asphalt road and onto a dirt road that cut into the woods. I slowed to a stop and double-checked the app, praying there was some sort of mistake. On occasion, the wrong address was listed. No luck, however. My destination was half a mile into the dense wall of pines. I took the turn and slowly drove into the dark tunnel cutting through the arching trees. I could barely see the sky through the dense copse overhead, just darkness broken by the limb-like branches. With each rocking of the chassis and each bump in the narrow dirt road, that heavy bag on the passenger seat seemed to rustle. I fixed my eyes on the road, deciding not to look at it after I began to hear a faint noise emitting from the stapled inner bag. A noise that sounded like a faint wheezing. By the time I arrived at the destination, my knuckles were white from gripping the wheels so hard. I was sweating, despite the autumnal chill that had breached my car and clothing. This part of the woods seemed colder than any part of the drive by at least 10 degrees. I shifted into the park and looked at the app screen, the only source of light aside from my headlights, which faded only a few meters out. The address was supposedly on the left, and the instructions read "Leave at door." There was no house in sight, however. It had to be a glitch of sorts. Above all else, I didn't want to leave the safety of my vehicle. This entire delivery had been all wrong. Something dreadful about it made me crave a shower. It made me want to run screaming from the situation I'd unknowingly gotten myself into. Crinkle, I saw the bag shift in my peripheral vision, and I let out a glottal yelp. I hurriedly opened the car door and got out, eager to distance myself from whatever was in the bag. I then navigated the menu of the app on my phone screen, seeking out the cancel order option. My score would go down, I'd miss out on the money, but I'd be able to get out of this strange gig that I wanted nothing more to do with. I was about to press confirm on the cancellation when I spotted the door. A few meters to my left, illuminated only faintly by the light of my phone screen, stood a door. It looked ancient, its thick wooden beams bone white from petrification. The design was archaic, something that belonged on the side of a medieval European church. Black steel hinges and latches ornamented it, but the most noticeable feature was the one it was missing. The door was housed in a frame of charred, black beams, but aside from that, it wasn't attached to anything. I stared at the structure and felt my heartbeat quicken. Dread and curiosity battled within my scrambling mind as it tried to register what this door was and why it was out there. I took a few hesitant steps towards it and felt the hairs on my body rise. With every step towards the detached door, the temperature dropped. I stepped around the unnatural thing to peer behind it, and sure enough, there was nothing behind it but endless trunks of trees. I'd made it this far and I just wanted to get my money and get out. With a few deep breaths, I returned to my car and opened the passenger door. With two hands, I lifted the heavy delivery, which shook in my shivering arms. It moved. Something gasped and gurgled from within, but I continued carrying the parcel over to that strange door. My teeth chattered from the chill as I placed the large bag of dead leaves in front of the door. I took a photo to verify the delivery, then swiped to complete it. And with that, I rushed back to my car and got inside as quickly as possible. I then heard the faint cries of an infant. I saw the bag shift and shake, poking outward from the inside. I shifted into reverse and began to backtrack down the pitch-black road into the heart of the woods, but not before I saw that door creak open. Not before I saw that rotted, black arm with long, desiccated fingers reach out eagerly. I watched it yank that screeching delivery bag into the impossible space behind the door that should not exist.